And we're back for episode 2.8. Our episode begins with Theon killing all of the ravens in Winterfell. This is so no one will find out that Bran and Rickon have been murdered. Now in the book, Theon doesn't do this, and it would be sort of pointless in the book as well. House Cerwyn is very close to Winterfell, and they have their own ravens. Almost everything that happens at Winterfell, the Cerwyns know about. And it's House Cerwyn that tells the world about Bran and Rickon's fake death. The ravens of Winterfell are a bit of a mystery as well. After Winterfell is destroyed, Luwin's ravens all flee to the Godswood. Why the ravens would linger there and not fly to their destination cities is unknown. It's also unknown who released all of the ravens from the cages. It may be that when Luwin died, his soul went into the weirwood, and the ravens are lingering near their master. It may also be that Theon is mistaken, and the ravens he saw were not originally Luwin's. It may be that all of Luwin's ravens burned to death, and all of the ravens in the Godswood were ravens that had Winterfell as their destination city. With no maester to collect them, they just lingered in the Godswood. Now Theon is pretty angry that Yara has arrived with very few men. Theon has fewer than 20 men, and in the book, Ramsay, posing as Reek number 2, has been secretly killing them off. Now here in the show, they've made Yara much more moral than Book Asha. She scolds Theon for killing children, and then expresses sisterly love for Theon and wants him to come with her. In the book, Asha is mainly angry at Theon because killing the boys was a strategic mistake. She felt bringing them back to the Iron Isles as hostages would have won the war. She then taunts Theon, which perhaps leads to Theon's greatest mistake. Theon chooses to stay behind and die. Now in the book, even Theon is perplexed by why he made this decision. The minute Asha leaves, he wonders why he didn't go with her. Perhaps Theon is subconsciously suicidal. The guilt of killing his own son has gotten to him. Or perhaps Asha's taunts got to him. Or perhaps someone is telepathically screwing with Theon's head. We don't know the answer, and neither does Theon. Now in the book, Asha actually brings 10 men for Theon, but Theon fully recognizes that staying behind is death. And so Theon gives his men a choice: stay with him or go with Asha. All of Asha's men leave with her, but nearly all of Theon's men stay. And this is the big difference between show Ironborn and book Ironborn. The Ironborn, the most seemingly chaotic characters, are the most loyal. Daenerys' Dothraki army abandoned her. Robb's northern army betrayed him. But Theon's men stayed with him to die. Next, Jon meets the wildling Rattleshirt. In case you didn't notice, Rattleshirt is wearing a giant skull. Now this scene is roughly where the book and the show converge again. In the book, Jon had been traveling with Qhorin, and in the show he'd been traveling with Ygritte. And here, everybody comes together again. Now interestingly in the book, Rattleshirt shows Qhorin the head of one of his rangers. The head is of Ebben, the Master Torturer. However, the other two rangers, Stone Snake and Dalbridge, are unaccounted for. One would think if they were caught and killed, they would be used to taunt Qhorin as well. It seems highly likely that Stone Snake and Dalbridge were not killed by the wildlings. We shall see if they reappear in our story. Now in both book and show, Ygritte vouches for Jon. However, what happens next is a bit different from book to show. In the show, Ygritte sort of pulls rank and says that Mance would want Jon Snow alive. But in the book, there's less of a pecking order. A Spearwife shows dissent to Rattleshirt and suggests that if Jon kills Qhorin, then Jon is cool. Qhorin then attacks Jon, knowing full well that Jon would hesitate killing Qhorin. Meanwhile in the Riverlands, Robb is busy falling in love. In the book, Robb is injured with the Westerlings. And next Robb finds out that Cat released Jaime. And boy is he furious. It should be noted that in the book, Robb is not angry at all. Now there's a couple explanations to why Robb is not angry at Catelyn. The first is that in the book, Robb has screwed up and married Jane Westerling. He may figure because he screwed up, he can't really yell at Catelyn for screwing up. However, that doesn't really stop Catelyn from being furious with Robb. The second explanation is that Robb actually wanted to exchange Jaime for Sansa and Arya. Jaime, if he did, he would look weak. With Catelyn doing it, Robb gets what he wants without taking the blame. Now in both the book and the show, Rickard Karstark wants vengeance and wants Jaime killed. And as I said last time, this is a load of bull. First of all, as I said in the book, Rickard's sons were killed 6 months prior. This supposed vengeance is massively delayed. But second, even if he wanted vengeance, he's never going to get it, and demanding it from his king is ridiculous. Jaime was a hostage, and hostages are important bargaining chips in war. So what's going on? Why is Rickard Karstark feigning anger? Well, as it turns out in the book, Tywin has Rickard's last surviving son, Harrion. It seems Rickard betrayed Robb not because of Jaime, but because he wanted his son back. Now here in the show, Robb sends off men to try to find Jaime. In the book, it's the Karstarks that head off. But rather than finding Jaime, they spend most of their time raping and pillaging the Riverlands. This causes the Riverlanders to hate Northerners about as much as they hate Lannisters. Now next we catch up with Jaime and Brienne walking and bickering in the Riverlands. They then steal a canoe, and I have to give Brienne props for using a proper J-stroke when canoeing. In the book, Jaime, Brienne, and their third companion, Cleos Frey, actually leave Riverrun in a boat. The third book, A Storm of Swords, actually opens with a big boat chase scene. Jaime, Brienne, and Cleos are fleeing Edmure Tully's men. Meanwhile at Harrenhal, Kevan and Tywin Lannister are trying to decide what to do next. Here Kevan wants everyone from King's Landing to retreat to Harrenhal, but Tywin decides to take his forces to King's Landing. Kevan also mentions that Robb has sent a splinter force to take back Winterfell. Of course, this is kind of impossible considering the Ironborn have Moat Cailin. So in the book things go very differently, and it's kind of confusing. Robb is in the far west attacking the Westerlands. His hope was to draw Tywin west, where Robb has higher ground. Tywin heads west and leaves Harrenhal in the hands of Sir Amory Lorch. However, Edmure screws up and he leaves Riverrun and attacks Tywin. Tywin is repelled, so he heads south and meets up with the Tyrells. They then go to King's Landing and fight Stannis. And then the brave companions defect to the north and sneak Roose Bolton's army into Harrenhal. Sir Amory is fed to a bear as Roose takes control of the castle. So in the book, Arya actually becomes Roose Bolton's servant, and when Roose eventually leaves the castle, Arya asks Roose to take her north. However, Roose tells her that he's going to leave her behind with the brave companions who he's giving Harrenhal to. Here in the show, it's Tywin leaving Arya behind to the Mountain who he gives the castle to. However, we're kind of getting ahead of ourselves. There's actually a story on how Arya becomes Roose Bolton's servant. When the brave companions arrive, they have with them 100 northern captives. Now there's only a few dozen brave companions, so Sir Amory was a bit of an idiot thinking the brave companions actually captured these northerners. Arya gets it in her head that she's going to free these northerners. So she asks Gendry for help, and he says no. She then asks Jaqen, who says no, but then she tricks Jaqen into helping her by naming Jaqen as her third name. So Jaqen, Roarg, and Biter head down to the cells and throw hot soup on all the guards and kill them. Freeing the Northerners actually proves to be pretty pointless, as the brave companions were already turning on Sir Amory. The move did for some reason make Roarg and Biter brave companions, and Arya becomes Roose Bolton's servant. Meanwhile, north of the Wall, we have this extra scene where Qhorin is trying to trick the wildlings into believing there's discord between Jon and Qhorin. Again, in the book, there's no build-up. The wildlings simply command Jon to kill Qhorin, and the two fight. Back in King's Landing, Tyrion and Bronn need more screen time, and so we get this extra scene where they're arguing about the pronunciation of a maester's name. Varys joins them, and they all start talking about the problem of thievery and battle tactics. In the book, a somewhat similar conversation happens between Tyrion and his head of the Gold Cloaks, Jacelyn Bywater. Bywater says the city is filled with tension and all Stannis needs to do is breach the walls. At that point, Bywater claims the city will implode from rioting, thievery, and murder. Knowing that the walls are the key to winning, a group of Stannis supporters called the Antlermen try to take control of one of the gates. Varys alerts Tyrion, who arrests them, and then Tyrion gives them to Joffrey for execution via catapult. But it turns out the Antlermen owed a massive amount of money to the Iron Throne. Tyrion essentially tossed the throne's money into the river, putting them further in debt. Meanwhile, at the Fist of the First Men, the brothers are digging latrines when they come across something very old from the First Men. It's a stash of dragonglass and an old horn inside a brother's cloak. Now in the show, Grenn states that this has been here a long time. However, in the book it's the exact opposite. Ghost finds the stash, and Jon thinks that this was buried quite recently. And recently makes a lot more sense. The stash is buried quite shallowly, and there's no roots on top of it. Additionally, the horn has bronze in it, and bronze does corrode. It is quite interesting that Ghost finds the stash. Let's remember that it's Ghost that found the whites that were brought back and attacked the Night's Watch, and now it's Ghost that finds weapons that can be used to kill the others. These are two actions that escalate the possibility of war between humanity and the others. Meanwhile, back in King's Landing, Cersei and Tyrion are having dinner when Cersei reveals that she's found Tyrion's whore. But wah wah, Cersei is a dumbass and has gotten the wrong whore. Now there's no real logic to why Cersei would think Ros was Tyrion's whore, but in the book there's a very good reason this mix-up happens. Tyrion had been hiding Shae at Shataya's brothel, and at Shataya's brothel Tyrion would always get a whore called Alayaya. Alayaya would read or sleep while Tyrion went through a secret passage to see Shae. And so this mix-up was Tyrion's doing. He was trying to make it look like Alayaya was his whore. Now meanwhile in the Riverlands we have this extra scene with Robb and Roose Bolton where they're talking about how they're going to take back Winterfell. Roose suggests using Dreadfort men led by his son Ramsay. So I guess Kevan Lannister was wrong about the Splinter Force heading north. Anyway, in the book, everyone is in a different location. Robb is in the Westerlands, Roose is at Harrenhal, and Ramsay is already at Winterfell, posing as Reek number 2. Now next we have this extra scene where Talisa comes in and tells Robb why she's in Westeros. A slave gave CPR to her brother, and now she wants to help people and doesn't want to be in a city where slavery exists. Now it should be noted that there's not much difference between slavery and serfdom under feudalism, and our author makes this point in the book as well. Anyway, hearing about slave CPR turns Robb on, and he decides to lose his virginity. Now in the book it seems quite likely that Robb was seduced. Robb is an injured 15-year-old virgin. It seems somewhat unlikely that he would have the energy or know-how to be the instigator, and the fact that the Westerlings were rewarded after the war points to this being a plan. Meanwhile at Harrenhal, Gendry, Hot Pie, and Arya are attempting their escape. Now here in the show, Arya has named Jaqen her third death and has tricked him into helping her. And so Jaqen has killed the guards, allowing Arya, Hot Pie, and Gendry to escape. In the book, however, Arya kills the one guard herself. As we know, in both the book and the show, Jaqen gives Arya a coin. A coin that, by the way, Jaqen must have hid in his rectum when he was in the Black Cells. Arya drops the coin in front of the guard, who goes down to pick it up, and then she stabs him. Meanwhile at sea, we're given some extra scenes with Stannis and Davos. We learn that Stannis feels shafted that he wasn't given Storm's End after Robert's rebellion, and asks why Renly was given it. In fact, in the book we learn why Stannis was shafted. Robert needed a strong lord in the Narrow Sea to keep his unruly bannermen in line. Thus Robert made Stannis the Lord of Dragonstone. Essentially, Stannis was too talented to be wasted as the Lord of Storm's End. However, Stannis refused to see this as a compliment and instead saw it as a slight. Now here in the show, Davos is made Hand of the King. In the book at this point, Stannis' hand is Alliser Florent. The Florents are the most powerful house to support Stannis, and Stannis is married to Alliser's niece, Selyse. However, Alliser at first supported Renly, so you can imagine how Stannis feels about his current hand. Now next we get some extra scenes where Joffrey is talking about military strategy. Even though Stannis is on his doorstep, for some reason he wants to attack the north. Now in the book we know very little of what Joffrey is doing before the battle. Tyrion tries to keep him busy by having him execute the Antler Men. This show idea of attacking the north is logistically impossible though. There is only one Lannister army, and it's under Tywin's control. King's Landing is being defended by a city guard. Now here in the show, Varys compliments Tyrion on what a good hand he is, and in the book Tyrion also thinks he's a good hand. However, Tyrion was actually a pretty poor hand. He spent most of his time worrying about his sister and where to hide Shae. Meanwhile, he was completely oblivious to the very real threats of Varys and Littlefinger. He gave away Myrcella to the Dornish and got nothing in return, and turned peace relations with the Starks into a botched attempt to free Jaime. Tyrion is somewhat redeemed in his defense of King's Landing, but that really makes him a good military commander and not a good politician. Now here in the show, Varys tells Tyrion about Daenerys and her dragons. In the book, it's very clear that Varys is trying to keep knowledge of Daenerys from the Iron Throne. At one point later on, he does tell the small council that dragons have appeared in Qarth, but he passes it off as a joke. Meanwhile in Qarth, Daenerys is still crying about not having dragons. Now you may be wondering why the Daenerys story is so slow, and the reason is because there's only 5 Daenerys chapters in A Clash of Kings. By comparison, there's 10 in A Game of Thrones. Essentially, there's half as much material to stretch out over a season. And finally, we get this extra scene where Asha is seen stealing bread for Bran and Rickon. Now in the book, everyone hides in the crypts, but they never come out, and in the crypts, it's pitch black. This is very significant as the darkness seems to help Bran open his third eye. Sensory deprivation and increased sleeping makes him reach out to Summer more. This makes one wonder if Bran is actually more special than his siblings or just went through more intense training. The Three-Eyed Crow calls Bran a Greenseer, and Bran is clearly a very powerful telepath. But this may be a result of the coma and his time in the crypts. It should be noted that Bran's blindness parallels Arya's blindness, and when they emerge from it, they have newfound skills. And that's all for episode 2.8. See you in episode 2.9.